On this episode, we travel to Indianapolis to talk with the Executive Director of Health by Design. Then we meet the city's Bicycle and Pedestrian Coordinator. Finally, we learn about the Regional Planning Commission in Springfield, Illinois. Stay tuned.
We're in Indianapolis, Indiana, talking with Tim Irwin, who's Executive Director of Health by Design. What is Health by Design?
Sure. So Health by Design is a nonprofit organization, a coalition of partners that really work at the intersection of the built environment and public health. So how our transportation systems, our land use patterns, our neighborhood design, our parks and green space, how that it either supports people's ability to live healthy lives or detracts from that. And so a lot of the work that we do boils down to opportunities for walking, biking, and transit use. And so that those are the types of things that we work on around the state of Indiana and specifically here in Indianapolis.
And the built environment versus health, is that a new idea? I mean, a lot of people might not have thought there would be a tight connection between the two.
Absolutely. So this topic has really emerged over the last 10 to 15, 20 years and has certainly probably internationally, that connection was made earlier than it is here, but it's certainly something that has taken off and is increasingly regarded as important around the communities throughout the United States. That connection between planning and public health, or the built environment and public health, really has to do with opportunities for physical activity, so allowing people to incorporate active transportation, walking, biking, again, riding transit into their daily lives. It's about safety and keeping vulnerable road users, so again, people who are walking, people who are biking and not protected by tons of steel, safe. It's about air quality and other environmental aspects. And then it's also about access, whether that's access to medical care, access to healthy food, access to a job, access to social and cultural events. So those are the primary health impacts. And then there are lots of other connections related to mental health and crime and violence and mobility and social capital and cohesion that come into play as well.
So how do you perform your mission? I mean, how do you organize yourself? How do you get started?
Sure. So Health by Design is now in its 11th year, and so that work has evolved over time. We have always done a lot of work here in Indianapolis, but again, have expanded around the state. And typically that work involves working directly with local communities to help them get policies in place, to get systems in place that will ultimately lead to changes to the built environment, to getting more infrastructure on the ground, to dedicating more funding to walking, biking, and transit. And so that takes a lot of different forms. There are times when we're doing work directly, we're doing data analysis and some planning work and that type of thing, but we also do a lot of technical assistance. So we're available as a resource to communities, potentially to come in to do a workshop or to facilitate a meeting or to do a presentation to leadership, and to help other people working at the local level understand what they need to do and what it takes to get this done.
Now, what are the roles of broad policies versus working on individual projects?
That's a great question. So I reference these terms, but we use what we call in public health a policy systems and environmental change approach. And so that is really working at a high level around policies, around day-to-day systems, whether that's internal practices within a city or systems of networking and leadership, that kind of thing. And so as one example, I'll often say, we're not an organization that organizes and hosts bike rides. We're an organization that's working on getting bikeways on the ground, more trails in place, more funding for bicycling. And so that can be, it is a unique role and kind of an intermediary role that we play, but a lot of that, again, is working with leadership and staff within a specific city or town, and at the state level as well, to help them develop projects and approach projects in a way that ultimately will lead to a better built environment.
Does Indianapolis have a pedestrian plan?
Indianapolis does have a pedestrian plan, and we're so proud of that. Health by Design was fortunate to receive funding through the American Planning Association's Plan for Health Award in 2015 in a partnership with the City of Indianapolis and with the Marion County Public Health Department. And a lot of the project was all about improving walking and walkability within Indianapolis, and a key deliverable was the development of the city's first pedestrian plan. And so that was adopted in May of 2016, and we jumped right into implementation. The plan offers a transparent, data-driven approach to how to prioritize projects, which is extremely important for us, but then it has about 40 other programmatic, policy-related, and practical recommendations. And so we continue to work to get those implemented and improve walkability here.
Now we're standing on the
Cultural
cultural
Yeah.
trail. What is that?
Yeah, sure. So the Cultural Trail, which is a legacy of Gene and Marilyn Glick, is a renowned walking and biking facility here in Indianapolis. It was the brainchild of Brian Payne, who's the director of our Central Indiana Community Foundation, and was a great display of partnership between the city as well as other private partners. It used a mix of federal public dollars, but then private philanthropy. So I think more than $27 million was raised to complete this 8-mile trail primarily throughout downtown Indianapolis, and to provide dedicated, protected space for people walking and biking.
What is the importance of it in terms of walking and biking in the city?
Sure. Absolutely. It is absolutely a project that has transformed our downtown. And projects have the ability to do that. And it doesn't have to be a trail or a sidewalk or a bikeway as beautiful as this, right? We know that when projects get implemented, when they are built, when infrastructure projects are built, people use them. And that creates more walking and biking behavior, but it also creates a change of culture in which we're normalizing walking and biking. And so specifically with the Cultural Trail, we have absolutely seen an increase in the numbers of people walking and biking downtown. My office looks out on the trail, which is a very nice thing, and I just see day to day just hundreds of people that are out here. And we have done counts over time and have seen that increase. It's also been so important for providing connectivity downtown. So the trail, part of the design and legacy of the trail is that it connects our cultural districts. So some key destinations and areas of the city or the downtown area. And so it allows people a direct way of getting from one to the other, again, in a safe, protected way, which wasn't possible really before. There's public art along the trail, which is an incredible contribution to the community overall and just enhancing our public spaces in that way. And then the other thing that it's done, and there's story after story and a report available on the Cultural Trail website about the economic development that it has spurred. Millions of dollars, I think $1 billion of investment that has been made along the trail since its development, with new businesses, with businesses choosing to locate here along the trail because of it, but also in adding value and enhancing businesses that were already in close proximity to it.
And the Cultural Trail goes right by the state capitol. I imagine most of the legislators have had a chance to walk on it at one point or another. What are the relative roles of the city county government versus the state or the federal government even in getting ped bike improvements?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and it's certainly true that every level of government, including the federal government, has a role to play in that. I'll give one specific example, or a couple of examples. We had shared with you earlier that there was a transit referendum last November that passed, and that will result in a significant expansion to the existing service, but also add 3 rapid transit lines, our first bus rapid transit here in Indianapolis. And the ability to hold that referendum required state enabling legislation, which was a very long-term and challenging process. Ultimately, we were successful, and that, again, allowed us to hold a referendum here, but that interplay between state and local government and issues of state and local control certainly comes into play. What we've seen, certainly funding that's authorized through the state legislature is incredibly important. We spend about 96.5% of our state transportation budget on roads and bridges. And other than projects that incorporate complete streets elements, it's only, a very tiny percentage of that budget going to walking and biking. And so we're perpetually trying to work to increase that. And again, to talk about the importance of building complete streets so that every project, outside of interstate projects, is going to improve safety and access for people walking and biking. And then I would just say within state government, within the administration, we've made a lot of progress over the years and seen a lot of growth, particularly in partnership like between our state health department, our state Department of Transportation, our Department of Natural Resources, even tourism, economic development, where they're talking to each other about walking and biking in ways that they haven't. And so the planning function and the promotion function that has come through that, and that, say, the Department of Transportation has, is really important as well.
Now, we talked about the very small amount of funding that actually makes it to pedestrians and bicyclists projects. When you did your pedestrian plan for Indianapolis, how big is the need for, just for sidewalks?
Sure. Yes, so that's an important question and something that the plan does address. So we went into the planning process knowing that there was an identified $750 million of need for for pedestrian-specific infrastructure. At the end of the planning process, we estimated that it was probably twice that much. That to do all of the improvements we needed to do around the city of Indianapolis, to add missing sidewalks where there were none, to do intersection improvements, to do signalization changes, and all of that infrastructure work would probably take $1.5 billion, $1.5 billion. Historically, with some exceptions, we typically dedicate about $3 million a year to sidewalk infrastructure. So $1.5 billion, $3 million, we're never going to address the amount of need. So first of all, that's why the prioritization process was so important, so that we do have, again, a data-driven way of making decisions about what projects happen and what don't, again, given the shortfall. The second thing that did was really highlight and focus the conversation that we need to have at the city level around the funding shortfall and the need to be investing more directly in pedestrian infrastructure in order to keep people throughout the city who are walking and biking safe, walking specifically. Downtown has fantastic infrastructure. It's also where the most people walk. And so it needs that. But we have, because we're a consolidated city-county covering 400 square miles, we have many, many neighborhood areas, many areas with concentrated retail and services that are virtually inaccessible as a person walking. They're certainly not comfortable.
So, if I were to come back in Indianapolis in a decade or two, what's your organization's long-term vision? What would you like to be able to show me?
Yeah, that's, again, a very good question. So I think for our organization, we're actually doing a very robust strategic planning process right now, and we're answering those questions for ourselves. So it'll be a shorter time frame, but what do the next 3 years, 5 years look like for us, and how do we best do the work that we're trying to do to help create change, right? When we think about the city overall, I think that having areas where we know there are gaps, and particularly or areas that are particularly unsafe for people walking, we know where those areas are. And so my hope is that we will continue to see concentrated effort in those zones, as we call them, in making improvements that will, again, improve safety for people walking, and that our ability to monitor data and look at crashes and continue analyzing that and building on on that so that we keep going to, we keep working through the high crash zones. That's something that am very hopeful we'll see happen.
We're talking with Jameson Hutchins, who's the Bicycle and Pedestrian Coordinator with the Department of Public Works for the City of Indianapolis. What does a Bicycle and Pedestrian Coordinator do?
Well, it just really depends on the day. So kind of throughout the 6 years I've been here, it's all the way from policy level stuff. I was kind of helping with when we had our Complete Streets Ordinance adopted years ago, kind of helping to see how we can work that into our program to being involved with design on projects, making sure that bikes and pedestrians get a fair shake as we're doing projects, all the way to event planning. We have a number of community bike rides that our mayor leads, and I kind of turned it into an event planner for a few weeks a year to kind of help pull those off. But then also coordinating with organizations, nonprofits like Health by Design, and just make sure that kind of all of the departments kind of have all modes of transportation in mind as projects happen to come up.
What is a complete streets policy, and how does that help out peds and bikes?
Yeah, so here in Indianapolis, we our previous Mayor Ballard, had made really bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure a priority when he came in, and so just kind of as internally, we were already starting to do a lot of this, but we also realized that a lot of it was relying a lot on individuals and personalities, and if for whatever reason people left or got new jobs or whatever happened, that maybe some of this good work wouldn't continue on. So really the advocacy community organized and really wanted to make a lot of the good work that we were doing the law, really. So it kind of lived on, and so what it really does is it makes sure that no matter what kind of project that we have, whenever we're touching a street for just a general resurfacing or any kind of maintenance like that, that we are really taking that as an opportunity to make sure that we're doing what we can for sidewalk access, bikes, transit, and all different modes of transportation, as opposed to just worrying about cars or single occupancy vehicles getting around. Just because, especially because of our budget issues, I mean, if we resurface a street, it might not be touched for another 20 or 25 years. So we want to make sure that that when we're in there and doing something, that we're doing everything right when we're doing it. So.
And you mentioned events. What sort of events take place, and how does that fit in with the physical infrastructure?
Yeah. So the ones that I'm most involved in are these community bike rides, which started with Mayor Ballard. He wanted to do a mayor's bike ride, which is basically him leading a group of upwards of 1,000 people sometimes coming out and just riding on the streets. Our police department blocks off traffic, so it's a very kind of calm, organized opportunity for people who don't usually get to ride on certain streets to really take advantage of it. I guess it would be similar to an open streets event or a ciclovia, except it's just more focused on a fixed route and as a single event. So, what I think those really do are just kind of build the community and get people out on bikes, knowing that and maybe they see a new bike lane or a trail or something and that they wouldn't have seen just kind of in their daily going on. So and then they come out a week later and give it a whirl on their own. So it's more than anything, it's a community building piece and letting people know that as a city that we take this stuff seriously, but there's also a fun element to it. So
how do you keep the balance between bicycle and pedestrian so they both get a fair shake and one doesn't dominate what happens?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think Kim Irwin does a really good job of making sure that we're kind of hitting everything in the advocacy group. All the groups make sure that we're hitting everything. But it's interesting. I tend to spend the majority of my time on bicycle related stuff just because pedestrian infrastructure and those kinds of things it's stuff that we've been doing for a long time. It's not stuff that's necessarily changing a lot. I mean, there's there's different things like at intersections and stuff like that that are evolving, but really it's kind of common practice within our department now to just make sure sidewalks are up to par, or adding sidewalks when we can. Whereas a lot of the bike infrastructure that we're incorporating is really nationally it's evolving. Design standards are evolving, so it's much more trying to fit in bike infrastructure to an existing roadway network that is, for years has been pretty focused on cars. So, it is important to make sure that we're always making sure there's a balance. But pedestrian infrastructure it's kind of got its place there. Like, we know how to do it. It's just a matter of making sure that we're doing it.
What's the long-term vision? If I came back in a decade or two, what would you like me to be able to show me?
I think I'd just say a network of bicycle and pedestrian facilities that really focuses on safety, making sure it's safe, comfortable, and that people can get to where they need or want to go. We're seeing a big change in our downtown area here in what we call our mile square, which is literally a mile square, our downtown kind of business district, where we're seeing a lot more residential, mixed-use development. So you're seeing a lot of people live much closer to where they work and recreate or whatnot. So that really allows bikes and getting around by foot. It allows it to be a much more viable option for people to kind of think about it more as transportation as opposed to just recreation. But also transit is, we just passed a referendum last November that allows for an expansion of our existing bus lines, but also the addition of our first bus rapid transit line. So also making sure that we use bikes and pedestrian infrastructure as ways for people to access transit. And I mean, we have a really large city, so in terms of square mileage. So since we're a Unigov system, we're 400 square miles. So it's a pretty big footprint, and it's not terribly realistic to think that everybody can get where they want or need to just on a bike if they live 25 miles outside of where they live, but maybe they can ride a bike a mile to a bus stop and throw it on the bike and go downtown and then maybe walk the last couple blocks. So just really making sure that all the modes are working together to make sure that we have kind of a thorough network. So in 10 years, hopefully we have a flourishing transit system that people really not getting in their car is the easy and the easy choice that they decide to make. And yeah.
We're in Springfield, Illinois, talking with Shannon Carrick, who's a senior transportation planner. Who do you work for?
I work with the Springfield-Sangamon County Regional Planning Commission.
And what does the commission do?
We have a multitude of interests with zoning, land and subdivision. My capacity is as a transportation planner for the urbanized area, the metropolitan planning area of Springfield and Sangamon County.
Where do pedestrians fit into what you do?
They're a very important part of what we do. We have a very walkable downtown. We are expanding and always consider pedestrians and multimodal users, be it transit, bikes. But with the pedestrians, that's the heart of what we do because, unfortunately, they also are at the greatest risk.
What's been the history of planning and treatment of pedestrians and pedestrian facilities historically in the Springfield area?
Our Springfield Area Transportation Study organization was started in the 1970s, and at that point in time, because we are an older community, there weren't consistently sidewalks and facilities for pedestrians. But as we've grown and new development, we like to make sure that we have accommodations for them for where they work, where they recreate, and where they just like to go.
So what sort of requirements would the developer have who was going to build something nowadays? Have for pedestrian accommodation and and how does that fit in with what a planning organization does?
Okay. A lot of that is over with our land and subdivision section, where they would make sure that any new development have accommodations both in residential and commercial areas for pedestrians.
So, what can be done to sort of catch up and make up for a period of time when something simple like just sidewalks might have been left out?
The city is actively engaged in, as funding is allowed and made available, in going through to some of the older communities and installing sidewalks, or as we start a new project, a road project, that there are provisions for sidewalks and side paths.
So all the planning that's done, is there a pedestrian plan?
Yes, we do have a bicycle and pedestrian plan that has the existing as well as the envisioned or our ultimate goal for those modes of travel.
What's involved in putting together a bicycle and pedestrian plan? Where do you start?
That was before my time. But where we start is we look at what facilities do exist, we see where people are traveling, and we work with our different jurisdictions, with the city, with the county. We work with neighborhood associations and the general public to help us come up with something that would be a comprehensive plan that would meet the needs of all of the citizens and visitors.
And member of the public is concerned about let's say a missing sidewalk or a sidewalk in poor repair, and in their neighborhood that maybe would let their kids walk to school or let them walk to the bus stop or the shopping center. Where does the citizen go? To your organization, to the city government? Where do they go to be heard?
A lot of it is just where they land, where they call. They sometimes call us, and we would direct them to whatever jurisdiction has that particular stretch of road or the sidewalk. But the city, the county, and IDOT are actively engaged and do address the concerns of citizens and try to make sure, as money allows, that we do have safe facilities.
Visit us on the internet at www.pedestrians.org.